You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
All right, it's the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin here with my guy Frank Tucker, representing the Crib, South Florida. And of course, we're representing CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals Network. And it's transfer portal season. And Miami added Jaden Davis, the hometown kid from St. Thomas Aquinas, returns home to South Florida from Oklahoma. And this is something that we put on the message board about a week ago. It's something that we were privy to, and it finally came to fruition this week. So Jaden Davis is added to a loaded DB room all of a sudden, and there's a lot of questions now, I think, as far as who's going to be the starters. My guess is it's going to be Devontae Brown and Daryl Porter, but Corey Couch also is a guy that we assume that would start as well. But now with Jaden Davis there, I'm wondering maybe is it going to be a rotation at nickel, or is Jaden Davis going to take one of those spots from Devontae Brown or Daryl Porter, or is it just, is he going to be in certain situations they'll plug him in on the field? Your thoughts on Jaden Davis joining the Miami Hurricanes?
I think it's a good addition. I know there are a lot of fans that were kind of skeptical of how good he is as a player because of coming from Oklahoma, who's not a traditional power on the defensive side of the football, and the fact that he wasn't a consistent starter from time to time at Oklahoma. Sometimes there are greener pastures for players, though, right? And I think that Miami is going to be a good spot for Jaden Davis. It's going to be a good reset for him. He's an experienced player. He has the positional versatility to jump inside or out, like you were just talking about. And like you said, I do think there's a question on who's going to be the starting corner on the outside opposite Devontae Brown. Right, Daryl Porter was not consistent this spring, despite having some really good moments. Jacoby George scores his touchdown on Daryl Porter in that spring game, and I think that competition is needed at a position that is replacing two guys that were NFL guys who had questions of their own. You got to see who the best guy is, and sometimes that means adding new talent to see if maybe you get another level of play from Daryl Porter, maybe another level of play from a Devontae Brown. And another guy we still haven't spoke about is Damari Brown. He's a guy we've seen in person, and we know he has the ability to come in and potentially start as soon as he walks on campus this summer. So I think it's going to be intriguing, and I don't think that Miami's done recruiting defensive backs in the transfer portal as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Daryl Porter, I think, he was just beat on a really good throw, I think, in the spring game with that touchdown. But I like what I saw from Daryl Porter Jr., and I think he did well to solidify his spot as CB2 on the team. But when you insert a guy like Jaden Davis, who has a little bit more experience and has played in some big time games over there in the Big 12, I think there's going to be a competition there for sure. And I do think there is also going to be a competition at that nickel position, because when you look at Davis and you look at his tape and highlights or whatnot, he's a physical corner. He's a physical guy who likes to hit and play press as well. So I would imagine that he's going to mostly play that nickel position, just kind of based on what I've seen from him as far as highlights are concerned. So I think it's going to push to Corey Couch to be really good to maintain his spot. So, which is great because it's Corey Couch, highly recruited guy out of Chaminade Madonna, and he's had some moments, as a Miami Hurricane, but I wouldn't say he's quite maybe lived up to the hype from high school, because in high school I think he was just an all around corner. He was a really good cover corner and also a really good tackler as well. So, but we haven't seen, I guess, the combination of both quite yet from Corey Couch. But I think that this is going to be his breakout season. But with Jaden Davis now in the mix, it just makes it interesting when fall camp rolls around.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think Jaden Davis came to the University of Miami with the idea that he's aiming for the NFL, and his future position in the NFL is probably at that nickel spot. So while there's probably going to be a competition on the outside, just because there's a lot of unproven ability, I guess you could say, with Devontae Brown and Darrell Porter at the University of Miami, you're 100% right. It's going to be a push for Corey Couch, who there are a lot of expectations. He's going into like his 6th year in the program,
Yeah.
it feels like. So it's time to step up, right? You're one of the veteran players in this team. He's sitting at around 185 pounds now. I think even in the spring game, he was just kind of out there. There were moments where Ryan Rigone was out there in early parts of that spring game, and we kind of wondered why. So that kind of turned me off to the idea of Corey Couch being a lock for this starting lineup. So
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that Miami's not done in the transfer portal. There's a lot of speculation about Xzavier Henderson maybe joining the team as well, another hometown kid out of Miami, Columbus. And there's a bunch of other guys as well. Tywone Malone is another guy another name that's been thrown around a lot as far as transferring to Miami. What are you hearing on those guys and any other guys?
Yeah, so Xzavier Henderson is kind of interesting at this point, because last week we were hearing from people very close to the situation that he was pretty much a lock to Miami. We saw him going on that official visit with Jaden Davis to the University of Miami after entering the portal. And now there's rumors kind of floating out there that he could be going to Cincinnati to play with Emory Jones, who was his quarterback originally at the University of Florida, was at Arizona State, is now transferred into the Big Ten. So that's interesting to see. And there really hasn't been a lot of rumors on anybody at receiver other than him. They offered one kid who just recently entered the portal, but no word on if they're going to get a visit there or not. Offensive line wise, looks like Amari Wiggins, the JUCO offensive lineman, guard center type player, most likely would play center at the University of Miami. He got a lot of work in the spring at Coffeyville at that spot. He's a guy that could be the potential Matt Lee replacement as soon as he leaves the University of Miami after this season. So I believe Miami's probably there's been reported a reported visit that's going to be happening for Amari Wiggins. On the defensive line, that seems like where a lot of the traction is right now. Tywone Malone's a guy you spoke about from Ole Miss, former top 100 recruit, top 5 defensive tackle. He's got a lot of talent, two-sport guy. Could come in and immediately help at that one technique spot that does need some help depth-wise right now at the University of Miami. I mean, you got Leonard Taylor, you got Joshua Horton, right? Like, it's more so to compete with that Jared Harrison Hunt. Continue to push Ahmad Moten, all right? Like, Branson Dean's another guy who can play that 3 technique spot, a little bit of 4-eye at defensive end. So Tywone Malone is a huge need, especially after losing Darrell Jackson, who was a guy who was playing that bigger defensive tackle role next to Leonard Taylor. And then Keivie Rose from Louisiana Tech is a productive kid who's supposed to be visiting as well. He was an all-conference type player, a ton of pressures last year for Louisiana Tech. And then another productive guy that Miami should see on a visit is Larry Nixon, 100 tackle guy from North Texas. And they're not recruiting a lot of linebackers. There's another kid from Ferris State that they might be getting a visit from, Connor Neer, No offer to him yet, but he does have some Power 5 offers since entering the portal from Division II national champion Ferris State. So that's an interesting recruitment there. And then defensive back, Traycon Fagans is the guy to watch at that defensive back spot, right? Omarion Cooper was a guy that there was a little bit of rumor on, ends up going to Colorado with his high school coach. Charles Brantley was a guy that Miami was immediately linked to when he entered the portal at Michigan State, a starter there, kid out of Venice. He withdraws from the portal yesterday, so nothing is happening there. And then Dancis Miller is more of a nickel guy, 5'8", 166 pounds. So I don't think that he ends up in this class, despite being a Marshall kid that was recruited by Lance Guidry. So I wouldn't be surprised for them to get a Fagans. And it does take up to 48 hours for some names to pop up in the portal. So I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe some names pop up a little bit closer to today. But I think right now that's probably what we're going to be looking at. I think they're going to be looking at receiver really heavy, seeing what's still out there in the portal. And after that, probably nothing at running back, no traction there really. Nothing at quarterback, nothing really there. And offensive line-wise, they seem pretty content outside of Wiggins.
Good stuff, good stuff. And that receiver that you said was offered is Cody Epps out of BYU. Interesting that they would offer a kid like that, because I thought they would look for a player with a little bit more size, I guess, and this guy's he's a 5'11" guy. So interesting that they would offer him, but some other big name schools are interested in him as well, as far as Ole Miss, Colorado, and Auburn. Now, Miami definitely needs to, add depth in at a bunch of positions, and we'll see what they do in the transfer portal, because, things just kind of pop up week after week, and we'll continue to monitor that on CanesCounty.com.
And just to bounce off that same idea you were talking about, he's not as productive as a lot of other guys that were kind of linked to Miami in that portal, right? Like a Jair Shorter from North Texas, who I wouldn't be surprised for Miami to get into, especially while they're recruiting Larry Nixon. Zachary Franklin, who was another 1,000-yard receiver, right? Like Jaquay Jackson, the Division II kid who Miami had on a visit, right? Keon Coleman, who it looks like he's probably going to LSU. I thought Miami would be going after more of those guys, because they're all above 6'1", and they all have really good production. The kid they offered from BYU, 470 yards, I think 5 touchdowns, which isn't bad. It's more of that Xzavier Henderson range, but he doesn't really fit the mold of that outside spot, like you said. So it's a little bit weird that Miami's going after him and not those other names. And they could be, right? We've heard that, Dennis Smith is kind of keeping things close to the vest, right? Miami is not trying to run up the market on a lot of their transfer portal guys, or their targets. And I think that there's going to be some surprises for sure. Like everything, listen, we try to get all the information that we can, but there's always going to be those surprises from the University of Miami that come out of nowhere. And I think that there's going to be 1 or 2 additions that nobody really talks about over the next few days.
Speaking of Jaquay Jackson, I mean, that's a player that I think is a good fit for Miami. I haven't heard anything as of late. Have you heard anything lately going on with Jaquay Jackson?
He's really just going through his process. Took a visit to Colorado, took a visit to Texas A&M. So it started off a little bit more quiet for him, right? Like visit to Rutgers, visit to Pitt. It seems like the options are only getting bigger and bigger for him, with school pedigree. But I just don't know if there was rumors that Miami wasn't even really sure if they were going to take him or not when he came on the visit. I think they wanted to verify size, verify personality, culture fit, things like that. Because when you are recruiting from a lower classification, right? Like a lower, like he's a Division II kid. Why is he a Division II kid? It's something to look at. It's not like FCS. He was balling at FCS, or he was balling in the group of 5 ranks. He was lower. That's an extreme drop off in competition. Is the Division II ranks, and he wasn't even at Ferris State like the Connor Neer kid, right? Sure. Who was on a back-to-back national championship level team. So it's something to watch there. I think because he went on a visit, Miami's going to be linked all the way until the end. But obviously, when Dion is sniffing around, you got to start worrying there.
Yeah, definitely. Dion has been. Seems like he jumps on kids as soon as Miami offers him. That's just a opinion I'm gonna throw out there. That's what it seems like. But interesting stuff from the transfer portal. Like I said, we'll continue to monitor everything transfer portal on KeensCounty.com. And of course, it's also recruiting season. It's going to continue to ramp up for the next couple of months here, and just like it did last year under year one with Cristobal, you'd imagine that there's going to be several players that will, um, you know, be showing up as far as offers, visits, official visits. June is a big official visit month. Kylan Fox, the tight end, is already officially going to be visiting the University of Miami. Jaden Jackson just put out his top five, which included Miami, Oklahoma, Florida, Ohio State, and forget what the last team was. I think it might have been Auburn. Was that last team? So, as far as recruiting is concerned, where do you think they go, and who do you think could be next?
It's going to be interesting to see who's next, right? Because I don't think we're going to see a commitment really probably until the summer, right? We've spoke about some names like Ricky Knight is a name that kind of comes up, has been linked to Miami and Florida State. It seems like he's kind of down to those two schools. There's an outside linebacker that Miami's looking at. But overall, I think Miami doesn't even know who's going to be the next guy. They got their quarterback in the class. I think that they're going to continue to go after a second blue chip quarterback. Mabry Matower, who's committed to Wisconsin, is interesting to me. He's been linked to Miami. He called Miami a dream offer when he was offered in 2021. So for me, that makes things a little interesting. But overall, I think that there's going to be a second wave in the beginning of the summer, just like there was last year. We saw that first group of commits. I wouldn't be surprised to see an offensive lineman jump in, or potentially another receiver, right? Like we get Chance Robinson, but there's a need there. And watch for Miami to continue to recruit Lawayne McCoy. I know he's committed to Florida State, but that was a very early commitment. There was no family on the visit. I would not be surprised to see things open back up for him at some point. Davion Gauss is another name to monitor. Miami's kind of seems like they're striking out on some of their bigger options. Jarrett Gibson looks to be like a Texas lock. Jordan Lyle commits to Ohio State. Stacey Gage probably goes to Oklahoma, from what I can tell. Kevin Riley looks like he's going to end up at Bama. So it looks like some of those other options that could complement Chris Wheatley-Humphrey are kind of dominoes that are falling away from Miami. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a flip in the summer from Davion Gauss from North Carolina to the University of Miami. That's something that is almost a guaranteed thing for me. Ryan Mack is another kid that we've spoke to multiple times that has long been connected to Miami because of his dad's experience as a linebacker at the U. And I think he ends up committing in this class. Josiah Trader is another guy that we could see commit late in the summer. It's a Florida State-Miami battle right now. But I think Miami has the upper edge, especially with Ryan Mack potentially ending up in the class and Rod Mack being an influence in his process.
What about Zaquan Patterson, man? He's a guy that, we both love. Obviously, a great kid, great athlete, just a dominant player on the field for Chaminade Madonna. Was very close to, or is very close to DeMarcus Van Dyke, who left the program for FIU. But he's a guy that is still very interested in Miami. Do you think he commits to the class in the second wave?
I don't think it's going to be the second wave. I think he's going to go through his official visit process, and I think it's going to be something that he waits until the season. late in the season potentially to end up in the class. I think he's going to take his process. And he can. It's Ohio State, Michigan, and Miami, with Florida State and Georgia kind of sitting in the background at the bottom of that top 5 school list. So I think it's going to be tough. Miami's going to have to win this year, and the schedule is favorable in the first 4 or 5 games for Miami to come out hot to start the season in 2023. I think if you get a 4-0 Miami Hurricanes team, you're going to solidify confidence from those local prospects like Zaquan Patterson, and even more, right? Like that could help in the Jeremiah Smith sweepstakes, where I know right now he's angry at Hurricanes fans, but we know that emotions subside a lot of the times in recruiting. And I think that he's going to be a guy that is going to potentially revisit things with Miami. So if Miami can solidify that Chaminade conglomerate, right, that core group of kids that they should be recruiting heavily, and I think a 4-0 start would help with that. That'll be huge, though, if they can get all of those Chaminade kids, right? That's a generational type class. We'll be comparing it to that 07 Miami Northwestern group that didn't exactly pan out, but still, right, just a wave of big-time prospects potentially ending up at the University of Miami. And Zaquan Patterson is going to be one of them, but listen, Michigan and Ohio State are they're two playoff caliber teams. There's consistency in the program. We know that they're developing guys, putting guys into the league. I think a strong point for Miami right now is that there was a corner for Michigan, corner and safety, that were draft eligible guys that ended up going after Tyreek Stevenson, right? So if you look at just, check boxes here, Miami had the highest drafted defensive back among Ohio State and Michigan in this class. So for me, I think that's going to help Miami. That's going to help Miami. And speaking on the DeMarcus Van Dyke thing, right? I know he's at FIU right now. I know he's got a good gig over there. He's doing an excellent job already on the recruiting trail. Grabbed the kid that I think is a Miami caliber cornerback already. And then the thing is, Adai could not be back next year. And I know Adai has done a good job, right? He's going to get credit for the Cam Kinchin situation. He just had 2 corners drafted, right? Yeah. And it looks like he's helping develop that group. But his contract is up after the season, and results matter on Saturdays, not so much on April 28th, right? It's more so, what did you do to help us win? And I think if it's not a great year for the defensive backs, we could see a Lance Guidry want to go in a different direction. Could that be to bring in DeMarcus Van Dyke back as defensive back coach next year? That's something to watch.
Definitely. And outside of South Florida, Miami is still recruiting a lot of guys. I think Aiden Braylon is a guy that we should continue to watch. He is going to cut down to 10 schools soon, and I can almost guarantee that Miami is going to be amongst those 10 schools out of modern day defensive linemen. And then also Elijah Rushing, although he hasn't officially locked in a visit as of yet with Miami. From what I hear, he's still working on that with Miami, and he's got a pretty solid relationship built with Jason Taylor. So I think there's definitely a possibility there for Miami. Those are borderline. Well, I think Braylon is a solid 4-star, but I think Rushing, depending on how his season goes, could be a possible 5-star type of kid. So it's definitely not just in South Florida or in the Southeast. Miami's continuing to recruit the West Coast as well. So we'll continue to monitor those names as well. But back to South Florida, unless there's any other outside guys or national guys that you think Miami should be or fans should be aware of as far as national guys.
Caleb Odom, wide receiver, tight end, he's interesting to me. I think Colorado's another team that's in the race right now, but I think that him and Miami have a really good relationship. KJ Duff is another kid that if Miami turns up the heat on, could end up in this class. Cameron Pruitt, is that edge rusher guy that I was talking about before. 3-star kid, but a lot of talent. 6'3", 215 pounds. Fits that athletic outside linebacker, edge rusher type guy that can drop into coverage a little bit. So he's intriguing. I think that Lance Godry likes him a lot. And yeah, I mean, T.A. Cunningham to me is still not a South Florida kid, but that's another name to watch. I have forecasted him to the University of Miami, and I think that's pretty much a lock, especially with his move to Miami Central.
Absolutely. Speaking of Miami Central, you were at Miami Central this week, so you had a chance to look at the national champions from last year, and they reloaded. Miami Central usually always reloads, but this year seems to be on a whole different level, bringing in players from outside of Florida, let alone South Florida. Bring in a quarterback, T.A. Cunningham, like you said. What did you think of the Rockets when you seen them out there?
100 deep on the roster. It's a machine over there under Coach Juke Joseph. They do an excellent job preparing their guys for the next level, and you see it starts on the first day of spring practice, where everything is just like I said. It's a machine. It's a machine over there. It's just kind of pumping. They have an excellent coach at every position. So they do a really good job. But just player-wise, Bakeem Kritzik, got a chance to talk about him. We have an article on Keynes County. Go check that out. He said great things about Miami, and I have a forecast in for Bakeem Kritzik, even though he's not going to be committing probably until late summer or early into this season. I think he's a guy that probably ends up with the University of Miami. Texas A&M is another team to watch there. He was linked to them pretty heavily back in the beginning of this year. But that move with T.A. Cunningham, they got a cousin-type relationship. They are living together down here in South Florida after their move from California. And he's been on campus like 3 times since the end of the season. And him and Shannon Dawson, really good relationship. And when September 1st comes around and Miami's finally able to call him, it's only going to ramp up even more. So I think that he's going to be a potential central figure in that 2025 class for Miami. And we see them recruiting quarterbacks really hard at this point in the 2025 class, something we didn't really see last year from Josh Gaddis and Frank Ponce. It seems like Shannon Dawson is trying to get those signal callers in. He knows that he can build a class around those guys that he believes in. Bakeem Kritzik, who I saw them throw the football. He is a natural thrower of the football. It pops out of his hand. And overall, they had a ton of Miami kids. Armando Blunt was out there, was just kind of working out a little bit. Wasn't really. It looked like he was a little banged up still from the season. Vincent Shavers looked like a natural at that outside linebacker, strong safety type spot that they have him at. Ezekiel Marcelin, we've spoke about him time and time again. He's closer to 210 pounds now, and he just looks ready to be the next Wesley Bissainthe at Miami Central. T.A. Cunningham, got a chance to see him. He's every bit of 6'4", 6'5", 270 pounds. He's a big boy. Anthony Smith is another kid that we got a chance to talk. I got a chance to talk to on Monday. We'll have an article out today on him. Great kid. Him and Joe Salvea have an excellent relationship, and he's going to be playing that one technique position for Miami Central this year. And then on the back end, you got Amari Wallace. Wayne McCoy is obviously a stud for them on the outside, and they are loaded talent at pretty much every position. Bring back 5 offensive linemen from that state championship, national championship winning team last year. And just overall, a lot of talent. And I think in 2026, they have so many kids that Miami is going to be looking at. And even in 2025, Randy Adarica, D'Angelo Thompson, those are going to be guys that I think could end up on Miami's radar sooner than later.
So you think Kritzik is going to be the quarterback, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Kritzik. I think J.C. Evans is going to get some run there too. I think J.C. Evans has potential to play other positions. Verified 4.58 40. He's all of that 6'4" size that he's listed at. He strong frame. We know quarterbacks can catch the football just based on taking snaps from the spread. right? We see the crazy catches quarterbacks make, and he looks like a natural athlete, moves really well. And if he has an understanding of the offense, I think he can really expand things, potentially as a tight end for this team. And that could be a potential position for him at the next level. That could expand on his recruitment. I heard that Texas Tech actually offered him as a tight end. So, so overall, I think he has the potential to be an impact player in this offense still, even with the inclusion of Bakeem Kritza as the potential starting quarterback at Miami Central.
Who's going to be a receiver for them?
Oh, they're loaded. They got Fadrell Andrus, who transferred over from Columbus. They have a litany of slot receivers that all kind of fit that mold of Guitar Six, who went to Louisville, and Corey Washington, who went to Western Carolina.
Right.
The kid that's
those two guys, I'm just thinking like who's replacing those two guys?
Yeah, so there's the kid to watch for me is a kid who's going to be a freshman next year, and it's Keith Brown's little brother, former Texas A&M receiver, Miami target at one point, Kareem Brown. There's a chance for him to be a guy as soon as he steps on the field at Miami Central. Can't be practicing with the team yet just because he's an 8th grader, but as soon as summer rolls around, I think he could be a guy that competes for one of those outside receiver spots because he is extremely talented. He's already sitting around 5'9", 5'10" as an 8th grader going into high school. And everything I heard is that he could be potentially better than Keith Brown. I think he'll be a double-digit offer kid by the end of his freshman season. And we've seen Miami Central do a lot of good things with freshmen. They're not one of those schools that just because I'm bringing in seniors are going to play. You got to earn your spot. Freshmen are part of that earning your spot part of the team. And I think he's got an opportunity to do some really special things this season at outside receiver for the Rockets.
Sound good. Interesting stuff from Sant over there on 95th Street. So we will continue to bring you coverage on different high schools in the area, the powerhouses, and some of the other contenders, as well as we continue to roll through high school spring football throughout this month here. And that is pretty much going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Unless you had anything else that you wanted to share, about the Hurricanes or anything else.
Right. Listen, we're gonna be at Booker. I'm gonna be at Booker T, Washington today. I'm gonna try to get out to Columbus, either tomorrow or the next day. Trying to get you guys as much as we can on the TJ Capers situation, right? Dylan Russell, right? Ben Hanks, Antonio Branch. There's a lot of Miami targets that we're gonna be bringing you some information on. And listen, I know transfer portal has everybody in a frenzy right now, but remember, you build your national championship winning teams through the recruiting classes of high school ranks, not the transfer portal. So excited to bring you guys some content there. Make sure to keep an eye out. We're going to be bringing content and information to you every single day on Canes County.
Frank Tucker, ladies and gentlemen, he is the superstar of CanesCounty.com. Make sure you follow the Crib South Florida on Instagram, Twitter. I'm just Robin. He's Batman.
No.
But still are the dynamic duo of CanesCounty.com. Tune in next time to the Storm Tracker podcast.